Got Dennis Lister here from the biggest international airline in the world, Emirates, Senior VP of Product and Innovation. So ultimately, thanks for coming, Dennis, appreciate it. Obviously, this is kind of a first for me. Never done a podcast type series or anything like that before. So I'm going to ask you some simple questions, hopefully. But we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff, right? Gold, fast cars, supercars, transit in those, flowers, diamonds. It sounds like you're responsible for a lot of romance in the world, Dennis, in fairness. So yeah, look, so welcome anyway to, Fulfil by THG. Look, how do you explain your job, Senior VP of Products and Innovation, in your own words? What is that?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us.
It's all right.
It's interesting being here, and it's pretty cool to see all the innovation that you have here at the Hut Group. For us, I think if you look at innovation, it typically starts with either a crisis or a demand or a necessity for innovation. That's typically how innovation comes about. For us at Emirates SkyCargo, we tend to look at products moving around the world, and we try and find ways of improving the efficiencies and the speed. I think there's two things when you look at innovation. One is how can we improve cost and time? And I think that's also very related to your business. How do you make customers happy?
Yeah.
So we always keep the customer first, customer in mind, customer in the center. And if you bring the customer in focus, and you are a customer, is how do we get your products to your end customer quicker? And that drives innovation. That drives us to do better with technology, with our aircraft, and with partners around the world. In Dubai, typically in the summer, it can get to 40 to 50 degrees. So it's quite hot.
Yeah.
So if you just look at the heat and you look at what we move around the world, there are some products you wouldn't even consider moving around the world. So if you look at the likes of vaccines, or you look at medicine, less than 10 years ago, no big pharma company around the world would have put product through, or medicine, through Dubai. And if you look at what we did basically in 2015, since 2015, we have invested more than $200 million in our capabilities and facilities. And we started moving back in 2016, roughly about 11 million kilos in a year. We now move 2,000 tons a week.
Phenomenal.
Right, so there's the investment, $200 million.
All through Dubai?
Yeah, predominantly all through Dubai. So we are a network carrier. Dubai is the hub, and that allows us to connect to more than 140 destinations from Dubai.
What else do you move around then? Because let's get into the nitty-gritty. I mean,
well, it's a range.
Diamonds.
Yeah, well,
gold.
You've mentioned in the
bullion.
opening, there's some interesting stuff we do move. There is, let's take Manchester. We're sitting in Manchester today. If you look at some of the fresh products we move, and that is flowers, and we'll get into that later on, but food. Food's a big commodity. If you look at the biggest flows of green beans and chilies and mangoes, etc., the UK consume a lot. So we fly from India via Dubai, connect into one of the flights into Manchester, and we supply things like green beans and chilies, okra, etc. So it's endless what we move. Gold and diamonds, roughly 50 tons a week.
Yeah.
Every week on our planes, connecting from various places in the world.
Do they pass through Manchester out of interest?
I think there's a little. There's a small amount coming into Manchester. I think every airport has a dose of golds and diamonds, and also cash. We move a lot of cash around the world.
I found something fascinating. It was pretty cool over the weekend, which is, I think Emirates is largely responsible for probably keeping every person who wants to send flowers to another person in the job. I believe you ship around about 125 tons of plants or flowers from, say, Africa to the Netherlands on a daily basis. I mean, how fickle and, delicate is that cargo? 1-2 degrees difference in temperature. I would imagine that cargo is unworthy by the time it even gets to the destination airport. I believe they're picking flowers at one day and noon in Amsterdam the next. It's on a marketplace, which is unbelievable. It's phenomenal. 12 billion different plants, different flowers. One company is selling in the Netherlands, but largely because you've enabled that international trade from one country to the next of something as delicate as flowers. So, I mean, tell us a bit about that.
So it's eye-watering. If you look at the volume of flowers alone we move is in the range of about 40,000 tons or 40 million kilos a year. So call it 100, 120 tons a day, and that's on average. Big markets, the biggest markets being actually Ecuador. So Quito is the largest, operating 5 freighters a week from Quito. And if you look at operating from Africa, out of Nairobi, so Kenya is a big market for us. To your example, we operate, and what you want to do is you want to operate at night. Typically when you're flying out, you want to keep it cool because temperature control is fundamentally important for these flights. 1 or 2 degree shift on the flight can be dramatic, again, detrimental for the flower. So we end up operating at night. It might be 11:30 flight at night, 11:35 it lands. We operate 2 freighters a week, scheduled freighters a week. That will then land in either Maastricht or Amsterdam. It's at 7:35 or 7 in the morning. It's a very fast turnaround. It's eye-watering fast in terms of the cut roses and stuff that we move. It's all temperature controlled. We operate a temperature controlled door to door because there are breaks in the supply chain where you have to ensure that the integrity of the temperature is maintained throughout the journey. Because if you get a spike anywhere along the way, it can actually have a massive impact on the flowers. So those are delivered fairly quickly on arrival. A lot of stuff's pre-cleared using technology to get it through. There's a reefer van waiting on the end, or truck waiting to collect, dispatched directly into fulfillment, and immediately then injected down into the markets and the distribution points.
What support did you need? Did you need advancements in Dutch customs for that? You need pre-clearance?
It's about having partners in place, and I think that's the key thing. It's the right amount of partners, because what you don't want to do is add too many intermediaries along the supply chain. So there's been a lot of innovation in that, and I think it's pretty efficient now. It's kind of tuned to the point, how much more efficiencies can you get out of it?
That's a sincere innovation, isn't it? But what's, in your opinion, what's the best innovation you've seen lately in, the last couple of years?
A lot of the pharma world has changed over the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years. So the need for GDP compliance, so in other words, it's oncology drugs or whatever you might be shipping around the world. There's a need to ensure that the integrity is maintained, so that if you are you need insulin patient, you want to make sure you get the insulin that is still effective and does the job. There's been a lot of technology and advancements, so it might be active containers, SkyCell containers, big cool boxes move around the world. We have actually introduced something called cool dollies. Strange name, but it's just a mega...
You named that, you?
Yeah, it is, yeah. Well, I've been called worse. And the reason why I think that was one of the best innovations for us is with the onset of COVID, our infrastructure was ready. We were one of the first carriers in the world to be sending vaccines to the developing countries, like Africa, Middle East, etc. So that's some pretty cool innovation in that area.
Exceptional. Life-changing innovation, really, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Life-sustaining.
I guess from that, how are you planning for the next innovation? You know, in your product role and innovation role yourself, what current products and innovations are you looking at today that may change the next 3 to 5 years? In terms of, let's look at e-commerce maybe, you know, and that avenue specifically itself. Anything going on in your world now which will help, you know, I suppose, businesses like ourselves?
I think it's a great question. And, you know, there's a lot of the buzzwords going around at the moment, AI, drone deliveries, eVTOLs, so electric aircraft. There are so many of these topics running, or buzzwords kicking around. And I think there's some very good points and some very good relevant topics to pick up on that. So if you look at digitization, it's a key component for what we're doing. I mean, the ability nowadays for you to get on a plane with your mobile phone, where maybe 5 years ago you needed a ticket, you still need a paper air label in some countries, and you still need paperwork to follow that journey. So I think looking out for us, part of my job is my team's job is to look forward to say, one, for the company, how do we actually continue making sustainable revenue? And I think a key thing is, as I said earlier, it's about understanding your needs as a customer and other customers, what is changing in your world, and we need to kind of be in lockstep of technology, digitization. And we will start in the next, we have already started. How do we provide capacity digitally? And how do we provide dynamic pricing to these different platforms that are out there today? So there's some catch up to do for sure. But equally on some of the cool technology, some of the AI, there's some very interesting things happening. And I think we definitely tap into those. We are tapping into the different technologies today to make sure that the customer journey is better. Again, cost and speed. Yeah. These are the things that we tune in on.
Speaking my language, Dennis, to be honest.
Good. Yeah. Excellent. I mean, but we believe in it. We really do. And as an airline, we have to be efficient, and we care about every dollar. Every second counts, and we care about every dollar on the plane. So the question for you, Tom, is what are you doing at the HUD Group that is driving innovation, and why is it important for you?
An innovation that we did last year, which I think is pretty cool. We upgraded 4.1 million customers in the UK that ordered a standard order delivery. We put a next day delivery label on it, got them out the warehouse by midnight in the evening, and delivered next day to 4.1 million customers that were not expecting it at all.
That's incredible.
it's not easy to do, but you've got to control everything.
Right.
Yeah, so but when you look at the cohort that were not upgraded versus the cohort that was, that's worth 4% in terms of retention value. We create these innovations because we understand the customer and we get that data feedback directly. It's not just about delivering the promise, it's over-delivering the promise. The customer demand is there. I mean, but the explosion of customer personas now, everybody's got their own needs and wants. Everybody wants speed, but everybody wants choice and how they want to be delivered to is now arguably a currency within e-commerce.
Yeah.
It's a lot more fickle than it is buying something off a shelf in retail because you don't get that feedback of data. Your customers will tell you in e-commerce in a heartbeat if they're not happy with the operational service that we provide. But in retail, you may not hear about it at all because people go in a shop, buy it, and may never return. You know,
well, I do think
different ways.
people like yourselves, like your company and other e-commerce, and not just e-commerce, any customer around the world, whether you're moving beans or mangoes, whatever it might be, or T-shirts or whatever it might be, you actually typically know better the best supply chains in the world. It's not our job to educate you on this. We can work with you to make things better. Because as an airline, we create the infrastructure. We spent the billions of dollars in putting the aircrafts out there and the phenomenal infrastructure that is in our case, in Dubai. That infrastructure that connects the ports, it connects now, there's a rail system being put in place, end-to-end rails kicking in. Some great infrastructure in Dubai South, and we have a good colleague, a good friend there.
He's an Arsenal fan, but
yes, he is, unfortunately. And well, you've made the investment here. Other people can leverage off that. They don't have to relearn all that information. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? Same with us. We actually have the infrastructure. We have the network. We fly to 140 destinations. We have the ability to connect anyone, any package, anywhere in the world. And I think if you couple that with some innovation and working together, you can definitely achieve that.
So in terms of the innovations then, how much data do you use to try and understand what the next innovation could be? You must have a wealth of data available to you.
We do. We have a big data department. Our EDH, or our electronic data hub, is massive, and we've got some very smart people working there. So I think data is super important, and it definitely drives innovation. And I think even part of us in the investments we make into the new products we develop, we use data. We look at trade lane data, because we have probably a very good indication of what's going on in the market, because we get early taste of volume moving around the world.
There's not a moment in time that we don't use data to make a decision in THG. We're absolutely obsessed with it because the end consumer is the only thing that matters. Anything in between, you know, we're walking around this auto store earlier, you know, just looking at how the robotics works, how the software works, and our current processes, but everything is driven for one obsession, which is the end consumer. Everything in the middle arguably doesn't really matter because the only thing we need to do is deliver the promise to the customer. So if you fail that, you can have the best looking website, you can have best marketing team in the world, but you failed delivery and statistically people don't return. So that is an obsession of ours. My entire career has been in sales, it's been in marketing, it's been on the front end of and the cutting edge of everything else. But now I find myself sat in operations because I feel like it's an obligation to make sure that we fulfill the customer promise. Because like I said, you can spend a lot of money in other areas of the business, then you can be completely wasted if you fail that delivery. So working with partners like yourself who are as fine-tuned in terms of the data, same as us, is where we start.
But looking 5 years out, 10 years out, how is this business going to change, and what do you have to do to remain relevant and not have a new entrant in the market that wipes this business
completely?
Firstly,
you remain relevant by having the right product to market, really. You know, if we're going to stay brand owners, the right product to market, but ultimately it's getting that product to the customer exactly how they want it. I mentioned before about having an explosion of personas. Every customer and every person in this room specifically has a different need and requirement. Your technology and your operational enablement needs to be able to suit everybody's needs and wants. Now, it's not easy to do unless you have total control, as I've mentioned before. So for our future investments and our future ambitions is going to be more automation, in fairness, to get slicker, faster, stronger, leaner. All of those savings and efficiencies ultimately should be felt by the end consumer, which is critical to us if you're to survive in a world which is becoming more and more competitive from an e-commerce perspective. Now, whereas our technology platform is slick end-to-end, from building websites, marketing services, cloud hosting, you know, my area is just operations, and I'll selfishly say that is the most important part of the jigsaw. But I have worked in all other areas as well, so I do understand it. But it is significantly important to the end consumer. Come back to the point I mentioned before, if people don't get their customer promise delivered at that point, they become disinterested, and there's plenty of other places to buy some of the products that we or our Ingenuity clients sell. A similar question back to yourself would simply be, you know, how do you go above and beyond and not just, look at your own innovations and hit those targets to delight some of your customers, but how do you go above and beyond and actually provide a service that the customer is not expecting at all?
Well, I do think definitely delighting the customer is key, but it's equally important to understand the real need of the customer. What do they need? Because the world is changing, as I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of change going on in terms of shifting supply chains, etc. So I think we really have to be in lockstep with customers to understand what is it that they need. Without that, we can build anything we want and it becomes irrelevant. So it's really key for us to understand what are those important things that you need as a customer. We dial into that. And, commodities moving around the world changes all the time. As I mentioned earlier, there's a range of things we move around the world. But it's bringing those innovations to the mix, whether it's temperature controlled, and maybe one day we'll have a cool box that can move from any point to any point in the world efficiently with no drama, maintaining temperature. Those are the sorts of things we need to be thinking about. And we are constantly looking at bringing innovation, but alongside with partners, alongside with customers. There's stuff we do on our own, for sure, as an airline, because we know we need to do it, and we can see what's required out there in terms of better equipment on the apron, creating better cooling facilities, better controls in place, efficiencies with customs, efficiencies with the ministry approvals. Because this is real stuff now, because we can all talk about the cool digital stuff, and that's really important. But when it comes down to it, you're only strong as your weakest point. We're converting freighters as well, by the way. So you talk about innovation. So we take an old passenger 777-300ER, extended range aircraft, passenger plane, and we're converting those. We'll convert 10 of those aircraft.
Stripping seats out,
stripping it out completely. Right. So blocking up the windows, cutting a big door on the back, making sure we can put pallets on the plane.
We did the same during COVID. We had to, because you're just trying to compress and reduce your cost per kilogram consistently. So ripping anything out. I remember we were putting 20 kilogram parcels on seats and strapping them with seat belts, quite simply, just to get more on the plane, because it was expensive at the time. So, and then we ended up with some of call it our own planes, and we debated starting THG Air at one point.
Interesting.
Yeah, at one point.
You've got to be careful, you can lose a lot of money.
Yeah, we'll do it tactically. We'll think 3, 5, 10, 20 years ahead. But it wasn't the right moment in time for us. But one day, who knows, we might be competing in the same space.
Well, not competing. I think you may come to us. We could cut you an ACMI deal and give you one of the converted freighters.
Well, there we go.
As an example, if you're interested.
Yeah, maybe, who knows. Yeah, you've got a lot of planes we might be interested in. You spent, $52 billion recently
$52 billion at the air show to buy a bunch of new 777s, 787s, and 350s. To give you a number on capacity, from a freighter perspective, we'll double our capacity in the next 10 years. Okay. So we look, as an airline, we don't look 3 years out or 2 years out. there's obviously there's certain things we have to do in the next 2-3 years, but you have to take a long-term view. You have to look 5, 10, 15 years out. 50 years out, 80 years out, where are we going to be? Is the airport big enough to operate in the next 10 years? I can tell you it's not.
Phenomenal.
I can tell you we are now looking at plans at developing the next airport, which is there. The infrastructure is there. It's about developing and building that out. Yeah. Because we'll be north of 300 aircraft in the next 10 years. Now, you could argue that, are we at the same operating capacity as pre-COVID or more? That's not the point. The point being, there's not enough of it. And there's a bigger demand for more capacity around the world as the world continued to buy more stuff.
And do you believe that's because of the trajectory of e-commerce, or just the movement of freight entirely?
So e-commerce is about, statistics, is about 18 to 20% from an IATA standpoint of what moves around the global air freight. I think it's a lot more than that. If I just look at our freighters out of Hong Kong and China, we do 26 freighters a week out of Hong Kong. More than 50% of what we move on those planes is e-commerce. So there's a lot of e-commerce moving around the world, feeding through Dubai and then feeding out into the network, into Europe, into America and beyond.
Well, that's the point, I think, from Fulfil by THG. That was born out of our obsession, because we've been a brand owner for so many years, that why would any other brand want to try and take on that challenge themselves? It's capex heavy, it's very expensive. They can flow straight into THG's slipstream in terms of 25 million shipments a year in the UK, 50 tons a day to Japan from an air freight perspective, BAU. 150 tons a day during peak. We ship a lot of stuff around, probably not as much as you and not as flamboyantly as you, but again, we're moving chocolate through Dubai, and we do that through some of your partners, etc. Now, we're the same as you, so those fine moments between one part of the supply chain and the next part of the supply chain is where clearly the savings are at. And I say savings because when we make a saving in these areas, how we've won with our own brands in the past is we've passed that saving on, whether that be the cost or whether that be the speed and the time. So we like to think we're quite innovators in terms of that space. In the UK, anywhere in the world now, we're delivering in 3 days, anywhere in the world, out of 13 warehouses, which is not a lot of
That's
warehouses.
incredible.
Yeah.
That's fast.
3 days is anywhere in the world to where we're shipping parcels from now.
The minute you introduce defects or issues along the supply chain, the weakest point is when it comes to halt. So you can have the best technology, the best fulfillment in the world, but if you can't get it to the end customer, you're done.
Yeah, exactly. Amen.
Right. Preaching to the converted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.